Welcome to another episode in this series looking at the North Yorkshire coastline. Today we'll be continuing a bit further south to see what new points of interest we can discover. From Saltburn right along this coastline to Scarborough and beyond are some of the highest and most dramatic cliffs in England. Nestled at the foot of these cliffs at the mouth of Staithes Beck are the twin villages of Staithes on the south side and Cowbar on the north side. The name Staithes comes from the Anglo-Saxon meaning landing place, suggesting that the reason for its existence relies entirely on the natural harbour here. Two things to note when visiting here regarding the dialect are that the locals call this steers, not Staithes, and a beck is a Yorkshire word for a small river. The history of the village goes back at least to the Vikings and probably before that. However, it didn't really develop until the 1400s when it served as a port for surrounding settlements. By the 1500s, it had developed its own fishing fleet of over 50 vessels and had a very busy shellfish industry. By the 19th century, it was the largest fishing port north of the Wash in Lincolnshire. This Yorkshire coast from the Humber and in fact all the way up to Scotland is well known for its unique style of fishing boat called a coble. It is unique in the fact that it is flat bottomed, enabling it to be launched and landed on shallow beaches such as this, but also having a high bow to withstand large waves and breakers during the launch. But also in rough seas, of course. It is thought that their design idea is a combination of the high bow of the Viking longboat and the flat bottom of the Dutch barges that regularly visited this coastline. Staithes also became a busy port for the export of alum from neighbouring settlements, which was used as a fixing agent in the dyeing of cloth, as we've already heard. In 1745, a very young James Cook came to stay in Staithes as an apprentice to a grocer named William Sanderson. This was the grocer's shop, now turned into a cottage. Cook fell in love with the sea while at Staithes and desperately wanted to be a sailor. Sanderson introduced Cook to his friend John Walker, a ship owner in nearby Whitby, and he agreed to take Cook on as a ship apprentice. Of course, I'm talking about the same James Cook that went on to be a captain in the Royal Navy and discover parts of Australia, New Zealand and Hawaii, to name but a few of his achievements. A sinister chapter in Staithes' history came in the late 1700s and early 1800s when the press gangs operated all along the northeast coast, kidnapping able seamen to serve in the Navy in the Napoleonic Wars. The men of the northeast were targeted because of their maritime skill and experience, and very few of them returned home afterwards. The village today is scattered with picturesque craft and coffee shops. There's a heritage museum housed in the old Methodist church, and it has extremely good inns and guest houses. It also boasts the narrowest street in England, measuring only 460 millimetres wide, called the Dog Loop. This is Port Mulgrave, and up until 5 or 10 years ago there was actually a proper path with steps down to the harbour, but there was a landslide and most of that path disappeared and it hasn't been replaced. I don't know whether you can see, but they've provided a rope here to literally climb down that slope, which I'm not even going to attempt with the camera equipment. So what I need to explain to you, I can do from here. Port Mulgrave was originally known as Rosedale. However, when an ironstone mine opened at Rosedale near Kirby Moorside, its name was changed to save confusion to Port Mulgrave, after the local landowner here, the Earl of Mulgrave. Port Mulgrave owes its fame to Sir Charles Palmer, who opened an ironstone mine here and developed it as a small port. Palmer was an entrepreneur and built several shipyards along the Tyne to address the need for coal export from the northeast to London. He also developed a steam-powered collier to succeed the wind-powered sail barges that had been used from the 1300s. With his success and wealth, he bought the land at Port Mulgrave in 1850, and at that time there was a small wooden jetty. The ironstone was loaded onto small barges and moved in and out by paddle steamers. By 1856, Palmer built a harbour to make export more efficient. The ironstone was taken to Palmer's own shipyards and ironworks in Jarrow on the River Tyne. By the 1870s, the iron at Port Mulgrave had run out, so Palmer opened a new mine at Grinkle, about 3 miles away. To get the iron to the harbour, Palmer built a narrow gauge railway which traversed over streams and valleys, and then at the top of the cliffs the wagons were lowered on a tramway through a tunnel by cable to the harbour. The tramway was operated by a stationary steam engine housed at the top of the incline, and a gantry was built so the wagons could be unloaded directly into bunkers on the harbour wall and then into the waiting ships. By 1916, the Redcar and Middlesbrough Railway connected the mine at Grinkle with Teesside and Whitby, and the use of the port declined. By 1920, cheaper foreign iron saw Port Mulgrave decline further until 1934, when it was abandoned altogether. During World War II, the fear of Nazi invasion saw the harbour destroyed by the Royal Engineers. The Cleveland Way brings tourists through here, which of course is a national trail running 110 miles through Cleveland and North Yorkshire, and it tracks its way along the cliff that you can see there behind me. So you get some magnificent views of the coastline. These cliffs are some of the highest in Britain. There are 3 villages which are very similar along this section of coastline. Staithes, which we visited earlier in this episode, Robin Hood's Bay, which we will visit in the next episode, and here in Runswick Bay. They all began as fishermen's cottages, built in a ravine from local stone and terraced together, hugging the cliffside, as you can see there behind me. They all shared a heyday when the alum and ironstone industries provided the economy here to boom, but all have shared the same fate too in recent years. With the closure of the mines and the iron and steel works, the village's population began to disperse over the years in search of employment elsewhere, leaving many properties empty. Fishing only sustained a few families, and so, as with many seaside locations, not just here in North Yorkshire but all around the British Isles, they became ghost towns. In recent times, most of these idyllic cottages have become the perfect holiday homes or second homes for those wealthy enough to afford them. And believe me, the prices are high here, and only occupied during the holiday periods. I've been reliably informed by the local people here that more than 50% of the homes here are not permanently lived in. And in fact, here in Runswick, there are only 6 families remaining as full-time residents. The prices these properties sell for is often way above that which is affordable by ordinary local people. And of course, this has a direct effect on the prosperity of these locations that are now totally reliant on seasonal tourism for their income. Winters are tough here. Having said all that, Runswick Bay is an idyllic village nestling at the foot of some even more dramatic cliffs. And if you look at it there behind me, it's absolutely chocolate box perfect. However, it wasn't always located where it is today. Back in 1682, it was a fishing village situated just a few hundred metres further north on that headland, until a natural disaster struck. The villagers were all attending a funeral wake for a deceased neighbour when a landslide of the soft Jurassic shale completely destroyed the village. Legend says only the dead man's house survived. Thankfully, no one was killed or injured. Runswick had its own lifeboat from 1866 until it was relocated in 1978 at Staithes, where it was easier and quicker to launch. However, in 1982, the local people organised their own volunteer rescue service using the original lifeboat house. Further disaster befell the village in 1901, when a huge storm caught all the men of the village at sea. The women of the village had to launch the lifeboat to rescue them. Many caves occur naturally along the cliffs here due to coastal erosion. And it is legend here that these were thought to be occupied by boggles or boggarts. In folklore, these can be mischievous goblins, but here at Runswick they were thought to have healing powers. The caves were called hob holes, and the parents of sick children would be brought to the cave entrance. A fire would be lit, and the parents would sing or chant a plea for the child to be made well. The section of coastline from Staithes all the way south to Flamborough in East Yorkshire is known as the Dinosaur Coast or the Fossil Coast, which is why this coastline is often compared to Devon. The geology of the coast here belongs in the Jurassic period, which formed between 145 million and 200 million years ago. It was the period in which the dinosaurs became extinct and many aquatic species disappeared also. The world climate was at least 5 degrees centigrade hotter than it is now, with 4 times the atmospheric carbon we have now. Forests grew at the poles. The seas were at least 8 degrees centigrade warmer than today, with huge coral reefs. Plant, animal and sea life were all different to today, though many species alive today began their evolution in this period. Britain during that period was covered by shallow, warm seas teeming with life, amphibians, marine reptiles, mollusks and fish. The shale that forms the large part of the cliffs here would have been mud or sediment on the floor of that sea, which is why every now and then, when there is a landslide here, it reveals more undiscovered fossil secrets. If you want to hunt fossils without the crowds, then come in the autumn, winter months. Summer months sees people flocking here for the beach, the quaint coffee shop and the inn, not to mention the many who pass through here along the Cleveland Way. Kettleness gets its name from 2 Viking words, kettle referring to the bowl-shaped bay here and ness meaning headland. That immediately tells you there have been settlements here from the 800s and almost certainly a long time before that, probably going back to the Bronze and Iron Ages. The original village here was much larger and situated on the headland. It had an alum works, ironstone works and a jet mining industry. Jet is regarded as a gemstone and formed from compressed coal. It is found along this coast, especially at Whitby, a little further to the south from here. The ironstone was quarried from the cliffs and the beach and loaded onto small boats. In 1829, the entire village on the headland collapsed into the sea, exactly the same as happened with Runswick Bay, and probably due to the extraction of ironstone making the cliffs unstable. The residents had plenty of warning and were evacuated safely without injury or loss of life. The new Kettleness, which you can see there behind me, was built slightly further inland and connected to Whitby and Middlesbrough by the railway, which opened in 1883. It closed in 1958 due to high maintenance costs of the bridges and tunnels and viaducts. The station building still exists, as you can see, and it is used by the Scouts as an outward bound centre. Kettleness had an airfield used in the First World War as a refuelling stop for reconnaissance aircraft operating along the east coast. Legends and folklore claim that there exists a black monstrous dog which haunts the area, called a barghest or barghest. Bram Stoker used this idea for his gothic horror novel Dracula. According to the stories, in the 1950s, a vicar confronted the beast and splashed it with holy water to banish it. Apart from fossil hunting, the other attraction at Kettleness Beach is the waterfall, which cascades spectacularly from the cliff face. As I pointed out at our last stop, unsuspecting tourists often get caught out by the incoming tides here. The high crumbling cliffs make it impossible to get off the beaches once you've wandered away from the main access points. Kettleness is accessible from Runswick Bay to the north, as you can see here, but make sure you don't wander too far and that you can get back safely before the tide cuts you off. One of the routes down to the beach at Kettleness is down a steep slope with the aid of a rope, if you are the adventurous sort. I am not, especially with a £4,000 camera to carry.
All I want
Well, that's all for this episode. I do hope you are continuing to enjoy the journey so far. Please join us next time when we will be venturing a little bit further south along this beautiful coast. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and activate the notification bell icon so you will know when the next installment is released. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.